It's nice to see you again. It's been several months. Good to see your smiling faces. It was quite beautiful on the way up here from East Lansing. Things are a little dark in East Lansing right now, but it definitely got brighter as I drove this way. And I get off at Lowell and then take at M50 and then take Cascade, and so there's lots of nice colors there. So make sure you do a color tour this weekend because the colors are finally in now, right? Yeah. All right, well, as you can see by my title, Unlearning or Healing from Death by a Thousand Cuts. That's kind of a unique title, I think. Death by a thousand cuts, let me tell you where that comes from. That was a Chinese torture and execution that was practiced for hundreds of years, and where the prisoner was tied to a stake in a public place and was just cut multiple times until he bled to death. That practice was stopped in 1908 in China. But we have all continued it in our minds. I'll get back to that in a moment. We already have knowing within us. The Christ self dwells within us. So we don't need to learn about love, really. We just need to let go of all the perceptions and beliefs that stop us from receiving the love. We just need to let go of all the false perceptions that get in the way of us knowing who we are in truth. So how do we unlearn? Well, we pay attention to the fact that death by a thousand cuts is an ongoing practice in our lives. It's what human beings do to each other. I should also say that Death by a Thousand Cuts is also the title of a song by Taylor Swift. However, her context is a little different. It's about losing a love, and every part of her life now is in pain, so it's death by a thousand cuts. So we're not going there, really. So just wanted to acknowledge that I'm drawing from the Chinese torture, not from Taylor Swift. But anyway. So death by a thousand cuts, it's what we do, and I do it to myself. A few months back, I noticed that I was into this negative thinking, this negative drama, these stories inside myself. And I became aware of it. And so when this happens, I become the observer, because that's what we need to do. So then the question becomes, am I the person who's thinking the negative thoughts, or am I the one who's observing me thinking the negative thoughts? And I can identify with either one, so I choose to identify with the observer. So that's the first thing. We approach it mentally. We look at the thoughts. And, of course, an obvious thing is we'll stop doing it, right? We know how easy that is. If we're obsessing about different thoughts, it's not that easy to stop it. And so I did my best to shift, to go in a different direction when those thoughts came up. However, it's important to go deeper, because we don't actually think thoughts like that. If you're in a negative space thinking negative thoughts, you're not actually thinking those thoughts, you are attracting them. You're attracting them by your consciousness. And the way you know that is because the last time that you were triggered, you thought the same exact thoughts. And every time you're in this position, you keep thinking the same thoughts over and over again. So you're not actually thinking them, you're repeating them. And so they're not your thoughts as such. They're thoughts that you have attracted, and you have fooled yourself into believing that they're yours, that they belong to you. You are certainly responsible for the fact that they're in your head. However, they're not thoughts that you are thinking. Just please keep that in mind. And so we have to approach it then on an emotional level, secondly, after the mental level, because people say that thoughts create emotions, but actually that is not true. Thoughts may trigger emotions, but they don't create them. Emotions create thoughts. An emotional state that you have attracts certain thoughts that go with it. The emotion comes first. And in speaking to this community over many years, I've talked about this, the experiments of Dr. Benjamin Libet at the University of California in San Francisco back in the 70s, where he showed that our conscious decision to respond came 0.4 of a second after our unconscious decision. So it's not actually a decision. In other words, you're programmed. You're conditioned. That's why we react with emotions. Emotions hit us, or things come out of our mouth before we've even had a chance to think about it, because it's programmed in. So the thoughts are not creating an emotion. There's a trigger there, and the emotion's already within us. It's an emotional state, or a state of our consciousness. So I looked at my state of consciousness with these negative thoughts. And what I found was I was feeling somewhat depressed. I say somewhat because it wasn't like clinical depression, but it was a feeling of being down. And when I look at depression, I think, what does it mean? It means hopelessness. It means powerlessness, often victimhood. There's nothing I can do. And so the depression, it goes with that. The approach to that then is not to try and get rid of the depression, but to feel it. Just feel it. Let the emotion flow. Now, when you do that, the important thing is not to feed it with more thoughts and drama, but to focus on what are the sensations in my body when I feel this thing I call depression. And one of the things I notice is I'm not breathing very deeply, because it's typical when you're depressed to want to slouch and breathe very shallow. So don't slouch. Straighten out your posture and breathe deeply. And that can help to move through that emotional state. And what I found with negative emotions is they all have an expiration date. If you feel them without resistance, the problem is we resist. We don't want to feel. We drink, we smoke, we eat, we watch bad TV, whatever we can do to avoid feeling our negative emotions. The important thing is to feel them. They're just emotions. They're a part of you. That's why you don't want to reject them, because when you reject them, they just lodge themselves somewhere in your body and eventually become some disease or some illness. That's what happens. Or we project them, blame it on the world out there, and it becomes part of our relationships or our finances or whatever we're experiencing in the world. So the idea is to feel whatever it is you're going through, anger, hurt, depression, to let yourself feel it without thinking about all the things going on in your life. So if you need to think about something, think about what are the sensations in the body? What am I feeling right now? And breathe and feel through it. And then the third step, of course, is to turn it over. Sometimes the feelings, the emotions are so overwhelming that if you're doing these things that I'm saying, it feels like the emotion is in charge of you. So turn it over. Ask your higher self, your Christ self, Holy Spirit, God, whatever you call it, please help me through this. Please help me to see this differently. So those are the three things. We approach it mentally, emotionally, and then spiritually. We also have beliefs. With these negative thoughts are how we cut ourselves. And think about it this way. If you have 100 negative thoughts per day, and most people in the world have way more than that, then it only takes 10 days for 1,000 cuts. Think about how it adds up. It's cumulative. And if you have something you're holding on to, and every day it's in your mind, then on and on it goes. You are literally killing yourself with those thoughts, or part of yourself. Beliefs we have are also a way that we cut ourselves. The belief that I'm not good enough, or that I'm in self-criticism or self-consciousness. And maybe we learn these kind of thoughts from childhood trauma. A lot of us had some kind of abuse. What do you call it? Mental, physical, emotional, or sexual. Some kind of abuse. And the thing is, if you're still holding on to that, then it's no longer the perpetrators cutting you, it's you cutting yourself. And my thought always is, it really was bad when it happened. Why are you continuing to do it to yourself? So if you can't work it through yourself, then get help. There are therapists out there who are experts at helping people heal childhood trauma or other trauma that we may have gone through. So do the work, because you don't deserve to be tortured like that. And you especially don't deserve to have yourself doing it, the torturing. So I ask you a question. Is there a reason for carrying your wounds throughout your whole life? Is there a reason for that? Do you get more points when you die? Like you get a better spot, a little corner in heaven or something, if you've suffered more? We practice death by 1,000 cuts with others, too. We criticize other people. Criticism, personal attacks, sarcasm. I was having a discussion earlier this week with one of my sisters, and we were disagreeing on several topics. And she started doing a little bit of ridicule and name-calling. And I said, wait, don't do that. You're calling me names, and you're ridiculing my point of view. I'm not doing it. Yes, you are. You called me this. You said this. Don't do that. You are my sister. I love you. Whether we agree on something or not is not relevant. We still have this love. And so she apologized. But that's my point of view with everybody. I don't care if we disagree on stuff, even stuff that's really important. The relationship is still the relationship. I'm not going to cut somebody out of my life because they voted for somebody different than I did, or because they believe something different than I believe. Everybody is where they are, and that's how we cut each other. We can't just have a discussion, it seems, where we have different points of view, but we have to start getting into personal attacks. And of course, our political leaders model that for us, right? But not all of them. The other day, I was watching an interview with Robert Kennedy Jr., and he's an independent candidate for president of the United States. And he's got some very strong opinions in a lot of areas, and he gets called a lot of names and gets a lot of labels attached to him, most of which are not actually true. But he refuses to do that himself. And he said that, for example, he's very strong on his opinions where he disagrees with President Biden. And he's very clear about it. He's very direct. He has facts. And he doesn't back down. But at the same time, he says, I like Joe Biden. I've known him for 40 years. And then the interviewer, who was constantly trying to get him to trip him up and was unsuccessful at it, she said, well, how do you feel about Donald Trump complimented you? And he said, I value his compliment. I don't agree with Donald Trump on a lot of things, but I don't have anything personal against him. And this is like, how many politicians have you heard talk like that lately? So whether or not you like him or you'd vote for him, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, I hope this is a trend. I don't know if it will be, but it could be the start of something. Another song, the start of something big. Isn't that a song? Yeah. Yeah, anyway. All right. Humans like to blame. And we feel like it lets us off the hook, right? There's a little bit of a rush when we blame somebody else. And yet, we end up in what's called the fatal paradigm, which is that somebody else is responsible for how I feel. Somebody else is responsible for my well-being. Yes, when I was a child, parents or caretakers were responsible for my well-being, but I'm an adult. And other people, it's not their job to take care of my feelings. It's not their job to make me feel a certain way. If they do with that, I am grateful. But it's not their job. And so I don't get to blame other people. I have to manage what's going on inside of me. So every time you blame someone else, you cut them, but you also cut yourself. Blaming someone else is like cutting yourself and waiting for them to bleed. And sometimes they will bleed. And it's really not that satisfying when you think about it. All right, I would say another thing we can do to stop cutting ourselves is stop thinking about the past. Whatever you did, whatever somebody else did, it was a result of their state of consciousness at the time. We are limited by our state of consciousness. Our learning horizon is only so far based on where we are right now. And so if you look back into your past, you may see some things that you think are unforgivable, but you have to forgive because you were where you were at that time. That was your state of consciousness. Hopefully now you've learned and you're no longer doing whatever that was. The thing is to learn from our mistakes, to learn from the things that we do and from what other people do, and not go there again. So being in a state of constant regret or of self-criticism or unforgiveness is not really healthy. We need to learn the lesson and move on. And you can turn it over to Spirit. You can do that anytime. I mean, that's how you transcend your state of consciousness, is you turn it over and you try to make your mind quiet, which can be very difficult. I've had times where I was upset about something and I turned it over and it kept coming back into my mind. And after about 50 or 60 tries, I finally let go of it and started thinking about something else. But it worked. I moved on. I was able to let it go. I get triggered sometimes still. The other day I can think of an interaction where I was triggered. Somebody made a remark to me that was cutting, and I shot back. Didn't even have to think about it. I just did it. And then I had some time by myself, and I'm feeling this anger. And so I say to myself, okay, Bill, you do know that you're insane right now, right? Because I am. If you're upset, then you are temporarily insane. Because physiologically, when you are upset, you are in fight or flight. And if you are in fight or flight, then it's the amygdala, those two little almond-shaped organs in the back of your brain that have taken over, and the prefrontal and frontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain, is out of it now. It's out of the loop. And so you are not sane. It's important to recognize that you are not. And so that's the time to maybe take a little time by yourself and get a perspective and go through the things I had already talked about. Looking at your thoughts, questioning your story, is it actually true? And letting your emotions move through you and turning it over. Those three things can be very helpful. And then you can move on, as opposed to obsessing about it forever. People hold on to things. I used to hold on to things a lot. I don't hold on as much as I do. As a matter of fact, as much as I used to, I've realized that I get triggered like that maybe once a week these days. But in the past, it was multiple times per day I would get triggered, especially if I'm in the car, driving. I don't get triggered at all in the car anymore. If I do, it's for a couple seconds and I'm done. So with practice, we get better at this, and I'm so happy about that because I spend a lot less time being insane now. So that's a good thing. So in order to let go of a thousand cuts, we need to practice something else, like love by 1,000 caresses, or love by 1,000 affirmations, or love by 1,000 hugs. We need to practice something different. We need to make the shift to appreciation. And by that, then, your theme is to embody your spirituality. That's how you embody. You embody by allowing the negative to move through you and out of you, and by adopting and bringing into yourself the positive, the love. Love by 1,000 caresses. I'm not talking about physical caresses necessarily, but in your mind to love, to hug, caress other people, to hug, caress yourself. The other thing that is important is to find groups of people to be with where you don't get cut, where you get that love by 1,000 caresses, whether it's family, friends, your spiritual community. Decades ago, I was a middle school teacher, and I also coached girls and boys basketball. And so there were a lot of long bus rides to other schools, and I became good friends with the bus driver, who was also a mom to one of the girls I coached. And in one of our discussions, we were talking about her motorcycle. She had a 450cc something or other. I don't know what brand it was. Anyway, I said, you know what? I'd really like to learn how to ride a motorcycle. All I've ever ridden is like a 50cc, little ones. She says, well, you could ride mine. I said, okay. So we forgot about that. I mean, I forgot about it, didn't think about it. And then that spring, I coached track and field. And this is middle school again, at 7th and 8th graders. So I'm coming up to the parking lot, and then there she is on her motorcycle, and she says, are you ready? And I said, well, yeah, sure. So I straddled the bike, and she gave me my 1-minute lesson on how to drive a motorcycle. She showed me where the clutch was, and the gears, and the throttle, and the brake, which wasn't everything I needed to know, but it seemed like enough at the time. So I took off on the bike. I went through a couple of gears. Everything's going well. Now I come to a 90-degree left turn, and I'm not going real fast. And so I didn't know how to make the turn. I mean, of course, like on a bicycle, you need to lean. But I had this big machine underneath me, and I didn't feel comfortable leaning, so I didn't know what to do. And so my mind went blank, and I didn't do anything. And I kept going straight, and I ran into a car, a parked car. I bounced off the car, and I was heading toward one of those big steel trash containers, And I think I panicked then, finally, and I started grabbing for things, and I probably popped the clutch and stalled the bike out, just a couple of feet in front of that big steel container. So I looked back at the car, and there's black welts all along the side of the car, and the rear view mirror of the car is lying on the ground, and the glass is broken, of course. I look at the bike I'm riding, and the rear view mirror of the bike is dangling here. Then I look over to my right, and there's 47th and 8th graders with their mouths open, staring at me. That was an embarrassing moment. Well, immediately, the mom of one of my athletes and the mom who let me use her motorcycle came running up to me. They asked me if I was okay. They gave me reassurances. They actually told me quick stories of other people they knew who crashed motorcycles. And they were really trying to comfort me, which I really appreciated, but I was still totally embarrassed. Next day I went to school, and I go early, of course, and there was 3 8th grade boys waiting for me. And I think they were making sure I was okay. They walked me to my room, and one of them asked me, how's it going, Ace? And that was it. I never heard another word for the next few weeks about my foolish accident. Nobody said anything to me. And I was kind of surprised, like, no teasing, nothing. And it's like it was forgotten. Until the last day of school, when there was an awards assembly. And we had all the students in there, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, all the teachers, a lot of parents, other staff members. And near the end of the ceremony, I was called up to the front of the group and given an award, a driving award. And it was a little wooden platform, and there was a metal plate on it that said, in honor of your first try. And mounted on that wooden platform was the rear view mirror that I had knocked off that car. So we all laughed. We all had a good time with it. That was love by 1,000 caresses. I had done this very foolish thing. I had caused damage to 2 vehicles, embarrassed myself, and yet, really what I received in return was love and acceptance and compassion. That's why it's important to find groups of people to be a part of who support you in looking for love by 1,000 caresses. You can do it for yourself, but it means so much when it's multiplied, when the people around you become mirrors for the best in you. That's what you want here, right? That's what you want this community to be, the place where you can come and nobody cuts you. But people love you. People literally give you hugs here and say good words to you and smile at you and give you their best. That's why a community is so important. And if you can't find this in your family, then create another family, friends, whatever, because where you get that, where there's not cuts and there's only caresses, hugs, good words, that's your real family. That's the family you want to stick with. In A Course in Miracles, chapter 27, there's a section called the Healing Example. And it says that if you can go one moment completely without fear, you will heal. It doesn't even have to be a permanent change. But find that if you're a Course reader, I see some of you are in a Course group here, one moment without fear is all it takes, and you can heal. One moment without attack, and you can heal. And those of you who read A Course of Love, chapter 20 says that you live in the embrace. You live in the embrace of God's unconditional love. So stop rejecting and projecting your feelings. Accept your feelings and embrace them, just as God embraces you. So I would say, in summary, we want to avoid personal attack against ourselves and others. And when we catch ourselves doing it, let's get to the bottom of it, allow the emotions to flow through, turn it over, so that we can change. Reflect on your own shortcomings, but with compassion and self-love, not with criticism. You are your state of consciousness in the moment, and the way that you expand that is not through criticism, but through acceptance and through self-love, through the embrace. Surround yourself with people who love you and embrace you. And remember that you are an expression of God, and that God is love. Be that person, the presence of love. I'm a person who wants to know the truth in terms of what's going on in the world, so I go deep. I go way beyond the mainstream media because you don't really get what's actually happening from the mainstream media. And I see in this world the extensive amount of corruption throughout this world, everywhere. It's mind-boggling how much corruption there is. And yet at the same time, I'm standing here, I'm looking at your lovely faces. I go for walks every morning, and I see the trees and the birds and the rabbits and the deer. I saw a young buck this morning. He was pretty cool. We stared at each other for a while. And all I see is beauty, unending beauty, forever beauty. That's all I see. And so I have a choice. What do I want to focus on? Yeah, I want to know what the truth of what's going on. I can focus on that stuff. Or I can focus on timeless beauty, which is what I want to focus on. It's the difference between 1,000 cuts and 1,000 caresses. I mean, ask yourself, which feels better? 1,000 cuts or 1,000 caresses? Which would feel better to me? And it's not a hard question to answer, I think. So focus on the timeless beauty around you. Deal with the realities, whether it's in politics or whatever's going on in the world or in your family or in your relationships. Be aware of the reality. Don't pretend it's not there. But at the same time, know that you live in the embrace of God's unconditional love, and that love is in you, and that you can influence everything that's going on out there just by being the presence of love. Thank you so much.